Stuart Graham, welcome back to the show, my friend.
It's a bloody pleasure to be here. It feels like an eternity ago since I was last on the show and since I've done a podcast in general. So,
Wow.
very excited for what's to come.
Thailand to van life. How was
Yes.
the transition between both of those? So, for those of you who don't know, Stuart and I met in Thailand when Miriam and myself were on holiday. Stuart and what's your other half's name again? Sorry,
Shara.
Yara. That's right. Met for coffee and then Paul, and it was so good to like break the trip up. I'm sure for both parties to just have some company and whatever. But now you're back. We came back to the UK really briefly, done your van up, and then you've taken it to Europe. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously we did 14 months around Southeast Asia, going to quite a few different countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, etc., etc. And then that, we both love novelty, we both love to travel, so it was kind of, there was an excitement of, oh, it'd be really cool to do it in a camper van. And we kind of like decided, found a van, bought the van whilst we were still in Asia. So one of my friends went and collected it for us, and then kept it on his driveway till we came back to the UK. Landed in the UK, went straight up, got the van, drove to Scotland, and spent about 9-10 weeks converting it,
Wow.
and then literally once that was did like a little test run around Scotland for a month, and then drove down to France. Well, got the ferry to France, and then drove through France, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, and now we are currently in Bosnia.
Wow, man. What's the transition between having a set base that's obviously sturdy, steadfast, and I know you moved around in Southeast Asia, but you would kind of like choose a base to live from and then travel around that area kind of like day by day. But now your base is on four wheels. How does that transition feel?
It's exciting and it's very challenging at times. I think there's so many variables now in the environment that we kind of exist within. So there's the aspect of like, yeah, you wake up with a new view every morning, but there's some mornings where you wake up and where you would normally have that little bit of structure, that little bit of a rhythm or a routine, maybe some rituals, they're much harder to nail down because the environment is so chaotic. So much can change so quickly. So it's really hard to have a plan. And that's not to say that they don't exist, but you've just got to be so flexible. You've got to be willing to kind of lean into the chaos a little bit,
Mm.
because even with like you say Southeast Asia, we did have a base. We would go somewhere for a month at a time or a good couple of weeks at a time, where you had time to build a rhythm. You had time to find a local coffee shop that you love to work in, and obviously that does not happen now. We usually move every few days, so you're in a different location all the time, but naturally that comes with challenges as well. We were just chatting before the episode started, and I said, it is a life of extremes.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean there's nothing in the middle, but the things that are hard are very hard, and the things that are amazing are also very amazing. So I think you have those kind of moments, like the pinch me moments, where you sat on the edge of one of the most beautiful lakes that you've ever seen in your life, and you're like, shit, this is so amazing. You get humbled by the scale of what's in front of you.
Yeah.
You feel this immense well of gratitude. There's like awe-inspiring moments, but then there's also moments where everything feels like it's gone wrong. Your plan is completely flipped, turned upside down, and you're running out of water. Your battery's on 1%, and you're like, oh, I've got to try and find this or go here. Or I've got to find a place to park tonight, and we've went to 5 other places, and none of them are suitable, or the vibe felt off. Time's knocking on, and there's pressures that you wouldn't expect to be pressures unless you're kind of in them and living them. But like I say, at the same time, there's that opposite end. It's just like anything. There's good and bad. There's pros and cons, and the main question is: do those moments that feel amazing outweigh the difficulties that arise from living this kind of life?
I would consider you and this is definitely a compliment, by the way, mate. A thoughtful coach.
Hmm.
You're somebody who thinks about the thought that they've had before they kind of speak of the thought process that they've gone through and stuff. And I think that definitely comes out in the way that you write, the way that you communicate. I think it's a really great quality to have in a human, especially in the 21st century when things are so kind of like. And I would consider myself to be thoughtful, but I act instinctively. I act on passion, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. So I kind of like I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then with regards to any kind of aspect of my life, would you say that living in this van life has helped you niche down on that because you're having to slow down your thoughts a little bit more? You're having to practice being outside of your comfort zone. You're having to maybe, it's in the coaching space, like turn those negatives into positives really quickly. Is it an area where you're learning more and more?
I think just like any kind of life or any, I would maybe describe them as vessels, right, or containers. Relationships, business, health and fitness journey, living in a van, they all provide a structure for you to be able to grow within. And there's naturally challenges that arise that present you with opportunities. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I grab every one of those opportunities and I grow all the time, because I have found it challenging. I have found it hard. I do react in ways that I maybe wouldn't want to, that are emotionally charged. I don't take time and be wise and intentional with all of my responses because I'm a human just like anyone, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
the pressure that can build up in these sort of circumstances, the challenges to, like, even you park somewhere and it feels a little bit off, and then that night you don't sleep quite so well, or we've been in Europe throughout the heat wave, so at one point it was over 50 degrees inside of the van, and you have to just weather that. And there's times where you have to ask yourself, am I being resilient right now, or am I just coping? Like, am I just getting by? And I think there's, obviously we would like to optimize towards resilience, but I think there's also times where we need to just acknowledge, like, I'm really doing the best that I can right now in what is arguably a challenging circumstance, and I'm going to try and show up for myself, and it might go wrong and it might get messy, but I'm always going to lean towards, how do I continue to show up in a way that aligns with where I want to go to. And naturally, I think as a coach, as coaches, we do have a responsibility to be working in that way, to be trying to grow, because for me, I would like to model to the people I work with that, you know, this was scary, this was big, and this was scary. There was a lot of things that could go wrong. There's a lot of uncertainty, and the question is, can you step forward with that anyway? And can you step into that fear? Like, I'd never driven in Europe before this trip, and all I've done is drive in Europe with absolutely mental Bosnian drivers. You've never seen anyone drive like Bosnians drive, like. But it's being able to step into that, and yes, there's challenges, and yes, there can be a lot of emotional intensity at times, but I think it's building. I get the opportunity to continually work on the skill set that allows me to regulate, and that allows me to show up in a way that I'm proud of. And I think that exists in all containers, and van life is just another one of those containers.
One of the quotes of yours that I wanted to pick up on today that leads us really nicely into, mate. Regulation is important, but it's not the whole story either. Tell us what you mean by that.
Self-regulation is important, right? Co-regulation, if we're doing that with other people, and I think as coaches, or what a coach should provide is an opportunity to co-regulate at times. But I think we've got to the stage where this is becoming much more spoken about, and it's amazing. Like, I love the fact that this is getting to the foreground, and we're talking about how we regulate ourselves and our nervous systems and our emotions to be able to show up in a way that we'd like. However, I think there's a kind of trend, and it's like anything, right? Like, too much of one thing isn't necessarily a quote unquote good thing. So it's thinking, okay, so do I allow myself to experience anger, or do I regulate it away, which is actually just avoiding it? Am I using what we would maybe deem to be self-regulating tools with an intention that isn't aligned with the bigger picture, that is maybe to be able to sit with an emotion? And I think we start crushing our emotional spectrum in to the degree where we're just using, it's the same as, you know, the whole ice baths thing.
Mm.
Like, why were people using ice baths? And it's like, oh well, I'm doing it to build discipline, or this or this. And awesome if that's your intention, but how much of it is just to say that you've done an ice bath? How much of it is still avoidance of, it's actually more comfortable to do the ice bath than it is to sit on your own with no distractions for an hour? It's being able to take that step back and go, okay, what is this tool currently doing for me, and is that serving my wider life and how I want to show up? And I think with the self-regulation stuff, we're really, it is one tool, but we need to be aware that expression and feeling and the embodied experience of our emotions, as well as just being a human, like, we're not supposed to be these optimally refined robots. Like, you're gonna get mad. Cool. It's how do you respond to that? Like, you're gonna say something that you don't mean because it just came out. Like, and we do all have an impulsive nature to a degree. Like, that's gonna happen. And I think when we start getting to this stage where we kind of like flatten ourselves because we're trying to be regulated all of the time. Like, think about exercise. You could argue that exercise, we're dysregulated. Our heart's going fast, our blood pressure goes up, but it's intentional. Like, we do that on purpose. So being in that kind of like, where if you think of your nervous system and kind of like arousal states, being hyper aroused is normal. It happens during sex. It happens during exercise. That's a normal human response. We don't want to flatten those. And I think it's just allowing for the range of emotion, of nervous system, of being human. And when we allow that, we start, you know, the people I work with, they've often spent so long ignoring all of that they kind of don't know what feeling emotions is. And arguably one of the scariest emotions to feel is joy. It's terrifying to feel just complete unburdened joy without that immediately transitioning to anxiety of, oh my god, what happens when this goes, or worrying about what's coming next, the inevitable dip. But if you're constantly regulating yourself back to some kind of baseline that doesn't serve you in that moment, and you aren't doing that exploration, then I think you lose the opportunity to experience the fullness of those emotions. And that's on the other end as well. Grief, despair, you know, heartbreak. We partly about giving ourselves permission to be human, and partly understanding that we can't just avoid this stuff. We have to at some point step into it and make space for it.
Mate, so many things that I could dive into there. I think one of the most prevalent things for me that came to light is that as somebody who was dysregulated 6 years ago, up and down, literally like a yo-yo, but to the point where it was out of control, if you like. Then now I would say I've done well to bring things back into kind of like a spectrum of like flatlining, which I like to call it in a good way, you know, like but when I do have those dips, because I'm so used to being regulated, it's, you can get caught in a trap of thinking, oh, that's annoying, or I should, like, because I'm a coach now and I have got things all under control and all of those kind of things, it makes you be like, oh, it just gives you that little bit of doubt. But then you have to remind yourself that, like, all of the things you said, right? Even though I have got way better, like, I would say like 500% better at controlling my emotions. When things go up, you don't notice it, right? because it's just like, I think as humans, going back to your point about not feeling joy as well, we're kind of guilty, I think, and especially being British, we're not allowed to be happy too
Yeah.
often, right? Like it's one of those things. Certain times of the year it's okay, but actually like hard work um and resilience is what's going to carry us through. But actually feeling happy and joyful, not for too long. So I think like maybe that's something that gets thrown our way or stems from just our culture maybe. But going back to my little tangent, it's that when you have those little moments of up and those little moments of down, what is the most prevalent thing that is how quickly you can then go to being back to that flat line. I think that's the biggest skill. And even if you can catch yourself a little bit quicker, going up about certain things that maybe shouldn't be too up about or whatever, and then going down too much about things that, yeah, they've annoyed you, yeah, they've upset you. How quickly can you get that spike going back towards that medium on the graph again?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful point. That it's that the rate that we can return to that kind of the way that we respond, the speed of the response, the awareness of the response. And there's no denying that we want to spend as little time as possible under the curve, right? Like we just, as humans, why would we want to experience all of that? And I think it's also understanding that that's inevitable.
Mm.
So it's like that's going to happen, but what we want to do is have the tools, strategies, awareness to be able to get ourselves out of that place. And we also know that if you are very in the emotional aspect of it, it's really hard to think clearly. It's really hard to make decisions that are like, yeah, that was a great decision. Like when you think of what are the circumstances that I make great decisions in. Now, me personally, I need to have eaten. I need to be at least relatively well slept. Like if I'm exhausted, I'm hungry, I haven't had a coffee, and I'm also emotionally dysregulated, great decisions aren't being made at that place. And I think it's that, what is my current emotional state? And even from a kind of confidence, self-efficacy point of view, like our ability to follow through with and our perception of ourself and our ability to follow through, I think emotional state's a huge part of that. So can I bring myself to a grounded place in this present moment, soothe any emotions whilst also making space for them, and then take action to move to where I want to go? And that in it's a huge skill set, but it's also one that's enormously rewarding, and it's the one that allows you to continue to show up with that consistency. You know, we talk about consistency and, well, what actually is consistency? And that's a complete tangent on its own, but we know that that is a component of success. So how do we be consistent? Well, when shit goes wrong, can we recover from that quicker? Can we bring ourselves back to baseline and continue to act in a way, like, we're going to make mistakes, that's inevitable, but that doesn't mean that we're not consistent. The question becomes, what do I really need right now to help me move forwards? And that's a really hard question to answer when you're very, like, in the emotional thick of it. You can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
Because you're just in it. And it's really hard to tune in and go, ooh, what do I really need right now? And maybe that is a bit of reassurance. Maybe that is a discussion with someone. Maybe that's a little bit of time, slowness, space, just away from everything. Maybe that's a walk. Maybe that's a workout. Maybe that's some food. Like, what do I really need? So it's being able to get to a place where we can start to tune into those and work on those needs. But regulation needs to come first. So we need to be able to regulate, and that's why I think regulation is super important. It's just not the whole picture. There's a lot of other things that go on around it. And naturally, if I say to you, how do you feel right now? And the limits of your emotional awareness and granularity is sad, angry, stressed, then it's actually really hard to accurately meet your own needs. Whereas if I'm no longer angry but I'm resentful, oh, interesting, what's going on there? Oh, well, I'm resentful because I feel that my boundaries have been violated. Amazing, so what do you need? Oh, well, actually, now I need to more accurately communicate my boundaries, or I need to have a hard conversation with someone who's crossed them. So meeting our needs goes from I'm angry, I need to calm down, which helps no one, to wow, I need to have a tough conversation about my boundaries. That's how we show up for ourselves. And again, regulation is a part of that. But emotional awareness of being accurately able to identify, I am distraught, I am frustrated, I am resentful. Do you know what I mean? I'm experiencing an overwhelming sense of grief right now. The level of accuracy that we can bring to that naturally increases the level of accuracy that we can then meet our own needs. And then consistently meeting our own needs is fostering a much deeper and more trusting relationship with ourselves. And that naturally changes how we show up anyway.
Yeah, because there's a huge correlation between the sort of there's some sides of the mindset, coaching, fitness industry that would just say like fuck your feelings, do the job, do the work, and carry on anyway. But there is part of us within us that absolutely does need to see evidence that when things get hard that you can carry on. Like there's no question. Like some of those medals on the wall, some of those races, like 40k into a race, I needed to dig deep, even if my brain was going, this is shit. Like you bring those weird emotions that just come up out of nowhere, the training runs that you get wrong, you're under like, and obviously that's more of like a physical point, but also at the same time, like going through the loss of my grandma this year would have been so easy to stop everything. I did cancel my event. That's like something that just needed to happen. It wasn't the right time. My family were involved in the catering of it and all of those kind of things, but stopping everything I was doing at that point would not have been skillful. But there is also this other part of us that if you do bury feelings that are stronger than just frustration, maybe a bit of annoyance, resentment, if you keep avoiding those things, like your gut feeling, for example, your biggest indicator of whether something is right or wrong, that actually, if you do avoid those feelings and you just confront them with doing shit, your self-trust eventually may diminish.
I think you mentioned the word skillful, and I think that just touches on the money, because there's a time and a place, and you've said this yourself, right? And again, really sorry to hear of your loss. Losing someone close to us is something we can never be prepared for, right? And there's a time and a place where we make space to feel some of those things, but maybe that's when we've got capacity to. So I think, cancelling the event made sense, but we can't stop everything because, like, unfortunately, life has to go on around us. So it's dedicating the time and energy when we can, and also acknowledging that does have to happen. And I kind of use this analogy with people that I work with. It's like a garage. We want to organise the garage, but there's a time and a place to open that box, and it might not be now, and that's fine. Put the box on the shelf. We know it's there. We know it needs to be looked at some point, but now is just not the time, because maybe our capacity is low, grief is overwhelming us. Now is not the time to start unpacking shit. Now is the time to be showing up for ourselves in a way that feels maybe a little bit more gentle, but is still fierce in the sense that I know that right now I need to go on this run. I don't want to go on this run. I couldn't think of anything worse than going on this run. The last thing I want to do is go on this run. But actually, what I need right now is to move my body in a way that helps move some of that emotion. Run, weights, workout, whatever it is. And then you finish it and you go, wow, yeah, I feel better after that. It's the skillful and tactical application of these tools. And I think, like you said there, deep in a 40k run, like, I've never done it, so I'm not going to speak as though I've got experience. I haven't. But I know from challenging things that I've done, or challenges that I've had to face up to, there is a moment where that little voice in your head comes up and you go, no, not today. I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to... My experience... And again, it's like emotions, right? People say, like, oh, emotions are valid. Or they're not valid or invalid. They just are. They exist. You are there right now. That is my experience. Like, I am feeling this thing. That doesn't mean it's true. Like, I can send a message to someone and they not reply, and I can feel rejection because it's on 2 blue ticks and they haven't responded. Now, that emotion that I am experiencing it's there. Like, I am experiencing it, but the person's kids just fell over and bumped their head, so they've had to put the phone down while they deal with that. Like, that's not my emotion is real. I'm experiencing it right now, but that doesn't mean it's factually accurate. And you touched on this of, yes, we get, and we also, it's like we've got intellect and we've got intuition, and it's how do we harmonise those together? We don't need to combat them against each other, but we need to acknowledge that there's a time and place for each. How do we bring them together and use them both to show up how we want to show up, to live in alignment with our values, our goals, to move us closer to where we want to get to? Like, that 40k deep in a run, if you listen solely to your brain and those little thoughts, you maybe wouldn't have completed. But instead, there's something else there that you tapped into and got yourself through. That's that marrying. Like, we can't succumb to every whim. But then emotions can also teach us a lot. They're those micro snippets of information. Actually, I can't tell you why I feel uneasy, but I feel really uneasy about this park up. I don't think we should stay here tonight. And you get in the van and you drive to the next one. I can't tell you why. I get a vibe. And in those circumstances, something we've learned from van life, trust that instinct.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel right, it's not worth it for the disruption of peace that you're inevitably going to have. So that's an example for me right now. Like, oh yeah, I trust my gut a lot in those scenarios. But at the same time, if I trust it all the time, then you miss out on amazing park-ups as well. So it's being able to bring them both together.
It's got to be something in the idea of learning what to listen to or not, which I guess in some ways is meditation, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. But when I think about, like, all of the hard stuff I've done, I have had to ignore that bit in my brain. But there's also other hard stuff that I've done, ending relationships, having tough conversations, where it is purely emotionally charged gut instinct stuff that you're dealing with, but they both lead to good circumstances at the end. But then there's this, like, pool in the middle that isn't your gut instinct and it isn't resilience, that's just like bollocks. It's just thoughts. And finding those, and it's such a challenge, and it's why I have such, not in a patronizing way, like empathy and like feeling for those people who aren't as regulated or are emotionally charged around a lot of things, because it's like that gap between the crap in the middle and the stuff at either end, which is really important, of, like, you know, reacting to your gut instinct and actually doing some tough shit because it's important for growth. That stuff in the middle, it just seems a little bit bigger. And that's me 6 years ago, right? That stuff in the middle was just bigger stuff that I would dive right into and get lost in. And the stuff on the end would just kind of like be white noise as well. But now those things on either end of the spectrum are like, they're a beacon. I can see them and I know when I've got to react to them. And the stuff in the middle is just like, you know, like a nice calm stream.
I think the noise aspect is really important. And again, this is just my opinion. So take it with a pinch of salt. But I think it's getting curious about what contributes to that noise?
Mm.
What makes it harder for us to listen to what we need, or to be in the place of calm, River, right? How do we get to that place of presence, of groundedness, which can happen in the moment anyway? We can get ourselves there effectively instantaneously once we have the awareness, tools and practice to do so, which I still don't do, by the way. Like, sometimes it takes me hours and I'm like, fuck, I should have done that 3 hours ago, but I didn't. And it's like, oh, okay, what could I do differently next time? What were the signals? But I think that noise of, like, there's a lot of contributors. Culture is a big one. You mentioned culture earlier on, like the British aspect of, like, tall poppy, don't lift your head above the parapet or you get shot down, don't look like you're having too much fun or enjoying it too much because there's something inherently wrong with that, apparently. You know, and I think you see that across many different cultures where, like, even just smiling isn't something that people do. But I think at the same time, culture is one aspect. I think there's a lot of expectations of how we should live, what we should do, how we should show up. Some of that does again come from culture. Some of them are maybe from family. We have expectations that you need to go and do this job. We have expectations that you should look this particular way, dress this way, act like this, perform like this. I think all of these kind of contribute to that noise, because it feels much harder to live in alignment with what's true to us, to what feels true to us, to the life we want to live. It feels really challenging to live the life that we want to live if we don't even know what that is, because all we can hear is white noise around us.
Yeah, and there's so much space you've got to give yourself as well, because as much as all of what you know until you unlearn it is driven into you until the point you decide, and some people never do decide until you decide this isn't working for me anymore, these thought processes aren't working for me, the way I think about these things aren't working for me anymore. I don't mind openly admitting on the podcast, mate, because of my background with my parents, I was, like, in my early adulthood, like, I'm never getting married. But then, is that like such a, it sounds really small on the face of things, but is that like, going back to the word skillful, unskillful, is that a skillful thought process to take with me for the rest of my life to judge it off of one situation or not? It's so fucking easy to do that. So easy to do that because it's impacted you as, like, a smaller person, an unlearned person, an adult growing up into this world. You've had this really deep, dark experience that no child really wants to go through, but like, unfortunately, people do go through it a lot, like, at whatever age. And then you get to a certain point and certain crossroads in your life, and you're like, why is it that I'm so anti or pro this thing? And that can go into so many different elements, right? Like politics, the way you think about your relationships, friendships, the way you even think about food, right? Like, can be such a, it can have such an impact on how you think about things. But then at some point there just has to be a decision. And, like, I think one of the words that we used in your previous episode, mate, I think was curiosity, as to why it is that you do feel so intently on those things, and then how you can create a path to move forward from them.
There is this kind of idea that the beliefs that we maybe need to look at the most are the ones that we don't even question, because they are so entrenched as a belief that we just believe them to be true. And there's loads of stuff like that around us, and we inherit those. Like, a really extreme example, but a very topical one. No one is born a racist. It's learned. And those beliefs are just so entrenched that, like, a 1-day-old baby is not a racist. It's taught to become one. because the culture, the beliefs, the identity that the people around hold. So the like your example with the marriage, right? Like if we're, it's about making the choice. So the curiosity part is you might still come out of that exploration around that belief that I still don't want to get married. Cool, but at least you've explored it. It's kind of like now I'm doing that from an informed place. I'm not blindly following. I'm not on autopilot here. I've taken a step back. I've intentionally examined this belief that is, I don't want to get married, and here's all the reasons why I don't, and here's all the reasons why I might want to. Here's the evidence that I've kind of got for this particular belief, and how much of that evidence is factually accurate and true, and helps me live how I want to live. How does this belief make me feel? If I truly live out this belief, how do I feel? What do I notice? And if you've done all of that and you've still came to the same decision of this is, I don't want to get married, cool. But you've done that exploration. And I think there's always resistance. And when it comes to it, like, it's hard. It is hard work to look at some of these beliefs. It asks something of you in the same way that any change does. And I think that's, like, there's loads of stuff that I am still unwilling to look at because I either haven't built the capacity yet to look at it, or because now doesn't feel like the right time. And again, this idea of right time, everyone's like, oh, there's never a right time. Well, actually there is, because if I'm now completely, but like, I am living quite a chaotic life.
Yeah.
So my capacity is naturally capped. So do I then want to blow through the roof of that? No. I've got people to show up for. I've got clients to show up for. At some point in time, I will sit down in therapy and I will unpack some of that work. That just isn't now. There isn't a perfect time, but there sometimes can be a right one. For example, if I lost my dad 3 years ago. I was in Bali at the time, and I woke up to a phone call that he'd passed. That was not the time for me to start on my fucking exploration journey. That was the time for me to show for myself. But someone's now telling me on Instagram that there's no right time. Well, there fucking is, because I'm telling you right now, that was not the time for me to be unpacking the relationship with my dad. The day after. So there is a right time. And like I said, it's based on capacity. So when we look at some of these beliefs, the big ones that like feel really entrenched or feel really scary, sometimes there's an amount of preparation that is required that says, I've got this belief, or I've got this a belief about myself. I'm not good enough. I feel worthless. That is a really hard belief to unpack because of everything that's around it. So then what we do is we build both capacity and tools and strategies to be able to regulate ourselves for if that gets uncontrollable. Like, if we're going to open Pandora's box, let's make sure we've got the tools and skills to shut the lid when we need to. And it's like, I was working with a client maybe 4 weeks ago, and we were exploring emotions, and we've worked together for probably 3.5 years now. So we've spent a lot of time on grief, on anger, on just kind of like building an emotional map. And we're now on what we would maybe deem to be the other end of the spectrum. And we were discussing love. What's love? And that is an immediately challenging conversation, because it means so much and so different to each of us, and we've all had different experiences. So prior to that conversation, I said, the conversation we're about to have, what tools, strategies do you know you have that work, that you can lean on if this gets uncomfortable? And because we've done all of that work, they're there. Oh, I know I can take myself to this compassionate place. I know I can breathe. I know I've got this. I know that rubbing my outside of my arms with my hands in this particular way helps me feel grounded. Amazing. We're going to use those. You can't do that if you don't know those, if you don't know what works. And that's only through consistent practice and curiosity and exploration. So some of the beliefs genuinely do require preparatory work, just because of what's naturally kind of threaded or interlocked with them. But again, I'd rather do that from an informed place. Like, I'd rather at least challenge or question or explore those beliefs. And again, it's curiosity and it's playful. Can we do it as like an adventure? Can it be an adventure rather than a painstakingly painful process that needs to be ground out? Courtney DeWalt, ultra runner, loves exploring the pain cave. That's curiosity.
There's that's just led me on to my next challenge is to I've done my 54s. There's this like process in my head at the minute where I'm like, I think I know a lot of my early journey with my running was definitely like a bit of a there was like a push energy there, you know, like I was proving people and myself wrong. So I've explored the fact of, you know, like what is the point of just continually pushing that burden? Burden is the wrong word. Challenge up. Like, so could you know, the possibilities are endless. The marathon des Sables or whatever, like, is how extreme you could go. You could row across the Atlantic if you really wanted to push your endurance thing. But I've taken enough confidence from what I've done, from where I was, that's actually okay. And I think there's like a real important for anybody who's in that process of, you know, like proving other people wrong whilst you build yourself, exploring that point of, okay, so what am I actually doing here to prove now? And that leads back to the point where you were saying around, you know, not unpacking Pandora's box until the time's right. But this is my opinion, so take it with a pinch of salt. There are some parts of you that make you who you are that don't ever really need to change. Like, I am not as stubborn as my dad, but I definitely do have a trait of stubbornness within me that I think is a positive, because if I didn't have that trait of stubbornness within me, I would still be the yes man, the very, very, very yes man that I used to be 10 years ago. I'm insanely empathetic and compassionate, and I get that from my mum. And I look at that and I'm like, oh, sometimes maybe I'm a bit too nice. But actually, if I was to lean into that too much, like, you'd take that kind of like softness and that approachable sense of, I don't mind saying that so many people will come to me for advice because I have that trait around me. And what I'm saying with this is, again, in some elements of industries and what you see online, both of those traits would be picked on to be, oh, you could work on that. You could completely drop all of your stubbornness. You just have to open Pandora's box, using your analogy, and dive into it and speak to people and learn how to unpack it. But actually, like, hang on a minute, some of those things serve me. So, and I think, you know, there's of course things, again, throwback to old Harry, the person that would get caught in the mire of the thought process in the middle of the two spectrums and get upset really because of my own mind. That needed working on. Not believing in myself needed working on. My limiting beliefs about like my body and the labels that I had of, oh, he's just a big lad, oh, he's just big boned. They needed working on. There are some things, some parts of you that should just remain completely the same.
I'm going to use a word we've used a lot, and it actually came from you, and it's just skillful.
Yeah.
Again, we need to be really aware that yes, we have the ability to improve ourselves, but what's it in service of? Like, what are we doing it for? And like you said there, like, we could open Pandora's, we could look at everything and we can fully examine our own lives, but to what cost? Like, if all we do is look inwards, then how much are we actually living and experiencing? And, you know, there's obviously the anti-optimization stuff going on a lot at the minute.
Yeah.
And it resonates to a degree, but I think it's just another pendulum swing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
we're kind of forgetting the point. That, like, if we're not here to live, what are we here to do? Like, and we spend so long, like, hyper-analysing ourselves, and for what? Oh, so we can hopefully get that little bit more. And I think, if something is serving us and it's moving us forwards and it's not negatively impacting our lives, yeah, why are we picking up rocks for the sake of them? I think and this is where I think it's really easy on social media and general media, because it is so polarizing. We just forget all of this bit in the middle. Like, yes, we may need to do some work to allow us to live a life that allows us to feel passion, or even allows us to go out and do the things that we want to do, and it feels meaningful. Like, yes, there may be work required to get there, but if there's no end destination to arrive at other than death, and everything in between is our experience of life, can we do the things that are required to help us have the fullest and most expansive expression of life? And that probably does mean working on some emotions so that they don't feel like burdens. That probably does mean building some awareness around maybe places where we could show up differently that would allow us to then do that. But there comes a point where you have to go out there and do the shit. You have to go out there and live. This introspection is important, no denying. But so's going out and living and having experiences. And we can examine all these beliefs, but if they don't hold up when we're out in the real world, does it matter? Like, we want to be able to go out there and do the thing and live and experience the joy that you get when you sit at the edge of a lake and say, wow, yeah, this is really, really beautiful. We want it's just to facilitate a life of meaning and purpose and whatever other buzzwords that you want to throw in there. But what's it in service of? And I think that's that intentionality piece of, okay, so we're looking at this emotion, why? For what reason? In service of what? Oh, well, actually, because if I have a deeper understanding of this, it will lead to this. Awesome. Let's go. But actually, well, I don't really know. That's what's getting curious about. Like, that's what we need to explore instead. And I think, just to touch on something that you mentioned, which is kind of this, like, proving other people wrong kind of energy. Again, I think that gets a really bad name online, as if, like, we've got to operate from this really pure place all the time. Nah, if you've got it, use it. Like, is that sustainable long term? Maybe not. But when you've got nothing else, and that's what's carrying you, use it. Like, you can only use what you've got at the time, right? Like, I can't operate from this place of self-worth and groundedness if I don't have that. So use what you've got to get to a place that does allow you to operate from there. But naturally, action is required. So we have to use what fuel we have. Can we change that fuel? Yeah, absolutely. We're not a vehicle that's trapped to be a diesel. Like, we can change our fuel from fear to joy, expansion, passion, any other buzzword that you want to use but we have to use what we've got at the time. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
It's just perhaps this is a better way to put it, and it applies to your stubbornness as well, right? When you mentioned this kind of trait of stubbornness, what are the limitations? What are the limitations? Because once we know what the limitations are, we just know that tool doesn't work outside them.
Yeah.
That skill of stubbornness is amazing for not being a people pleaser, but actually, its limitations are this. Cool. So in those circumstances, we don't lean on that skill. We lean on a different skill. Do you know what I mean? It's like knowing. It's just being able to map these little things out. Be like, yeah, actually, I can be too stubborn in this scenario, or I can be maybe not too compassionate, because that would maybe question if compassion has limits, which don't know. But I can be too soft. I can be too easygoing. Okay, so what are the scenarios where that isn't serving us? Oh, well, it's here, and here. It's at work when I just let my boss off with being a dickhead. Right. So that's a different scenario. But knowing those limitations and being able to actively select oh, actually, I want to lean on this skill at this moment in time. Prior to this call, I was like, how do I want to show up? I want to be intentional with my words. I want to try and be accurate. I would like to be aware. I would like to listen to exactly what you're saying. And I would just like to be here in my body and enjoy the experience of having a chat with you and a catch up from our time in Thailand. Intentionality. Maybe I haven't succeeded at that. I'm noticing thoughts arise that say, oh, you've rambled too much. You've said too much and not listened enough. I'll deal with those afterwards because they're bringing me out the presence that I'm experiencing. So I'll reflect and be like, oh, yeah, cool. And just, I'll roll with that and explore it.
I'd like to offer some reassurance, mate, that it's been an amazing episode so far. And one thing I think I said it to you in Thailand, mate, is that I feel like you and we could sit down on an 8-hour podcast and just go through certain different things. And it's definitely I'm going to use the word thoughtful again, very thoughtful episode every time I get you on. And that kind of leads me into my next point. I did just quickly use my phone at the start of the episode. So I was like, shit, I didn't write down the date that you came on last, because it leads me into my next question. Were you finished on that point? Sorry, mate. I did.
No,
Yeah.
please continue.
So it was February the 16th, 2024. So 2 years goes by like that. One of the things that I know you and I are pretty curious and we speak to a lot of our clients around is identity, and how identity change can make a massive impact on who you are and who you're becoming. So since the 16th of February 2024, how has Stuart Graham's identity changed? And who have you become, and who are you becoming right now?
That is a beautiful question. And in line with both your compliment, which I deeply appreciate, and my intention, I'm just going to take a moment and consider exactly what you've asked. I would like to believe that the key identity shift that I've experienced since then to now is primarily around the beliefs, ideas, concepts around emotions. I feel like I'm much more emotionally aware, I think, than I was back then, and I think that's an ever-growing journey. And I do always question how much of that comes as a natural part of maturing as an adult, as just being more of an adult and experiencing more of the world. But I am, from an identity perspective, I think I've let go of parts of myself that felt resentful towards parents. I think I've managed to let go of the parts of myself that felt more victimized more often. And when I say let go, I would more class it as like bringing them into the fold. Of like, you don't need to stand out there on your own. I think I have built an identity that has the evidence to say I can do hard things and travel, and in my own version of hard things, there is this. And living with change. Change was something I resisted a lot. I would hope to continue becoming someone who is articulate, but not intellectualizing all the time. I would like to continue to become the person who has competence without it becoming hyper-independence and costing me. And I would like to continue to become the type of coach that co-creates with the person that I coach a place of change, a space of change, and to be thoughtful, I'll use your word, a thoughtful facilitator of that change in whatever that person needs. And I would like to continue to be courageous, resilient, compassionate, and more connected to myself. I think that's an ever-going journey, like many others. And I would say I am more connected now. I'm more aware of my needs, definitely, than I was in at the start of 2024. I can more easily sit with the emotions that come up or arise. I am more comfortable asking for what I want and being assertive. But those still need work. They all need work. So I hope that answers the question.
Definitely does. I think going back to your point around, it was around not wanting to, no, it was around growing up and how much impact that has had on the way that you think around things. And then you kind of like labeled that with, is that just growing up and is that just maturity? I think you're right. And funny enough, I have the same thought process. I'm like, oh, maybe I am a little bit more wise now, but is that because I've got, you know, got older and experienced more and seen more? But one thing that I have come to the conclusion of, and that whilst you were speaking, then I was like, no, I'm happy to use this as my opinion. When you invest in yourself and you take time to find out who you are and work on areas that you're happy to work on, and maybe sometimes need working on within yourself. I think what you do is you put fast forward on your maturity levels. And when you do that, I don't mind saying this out loud. When you do that, I think you then noticeably see how many people don't. And not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I think when you do press fast forward on your growth, you get mentors, you do programs, you read books, you take in podcasts like this or the bigger ones like, Modern Wisdoms and stuff. It just puts a fast forward into your brain of like, oh, okay, you can overcome this challenge or this belief or this by doing this or listening to this expert or working with this person. And sometimes quite quickly it can not put you ahead of people in like an egotistical way, but just leave you thinking, okay, so like what's next? And then you look around, you're like shit, like I'm here right now. Where do I go next? And then that can lead to that kind of hedonic treadmill thought process.
Yeah, and I think there has to be an acknowledgement that someone who is working on becoming more aware of understanding their emotions, of working on what we would usually label mindset and all that kind of jazz, it would be silly to say that you don't change, because you do. Like, you change as a person, and if other people aren't changing at the same rate that you are changing, for good or worse, right? Like, we can change and end up worse. Just this is done intentionally, so that it doesn't lead us down a path that we didn't want to live. And we also need to acknowledge there's a huge aspect of just like luck and life, and those are real things. How much they play a part, we don't really know. Circumstances are a huge part. That's not to discredit any of those. And this also isn't to sit on our pedestals and be like, oh, look at us, we do self-development. Like you said, it's not about being egotistical. It's I just don't want to live how I currently live, and I am going to do the intentional work to live in a different way, to live more intentionally, less on autopilot. And like, if people are happy doing that, fair. You do you. You do what you want to do in your life. I'm going to do what I want to do. And this is how I want to do it. And this is how I want to show up. And I want that level of thoughtfulness. I want to be able to go, was that how I wanted to respond in that situation? And naturally, as change happens, people can drift. And fine. Like, no one said that anything was ever had to be forever. And I also think there's, like I have friends back home who I went and seen this year for the first time in like 5 years because of travel, because of just being in different countries. And I have changed as a person because 5 years has passed. They've all changed as people because 5 years have passed. But when we met up, it was like we'd never left. And that doesn't mean that I've regressed back to that person I was there. It's just that often it goes beyond just merely, and this goes back to the point of what we're doing it in service of. Like, if we're doing self-development for the sole reason of becoming the best version of ourselves, which is a different topic entirely, but how do you show up in relationships? You can be the most actualized person, you can have the best morning ritual, you can do 35, 40, an hour of meditation every day. How do you speak to your partner when she's upset? How do you talk to your kids? How do you communicate with a friend? How do you show up when a friend is struggling and they're asking for help? Do you wade in as the fixer? Or do you sit down there in the mud with them? And can you be there for them emotionally? That's different. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just like, yes, do the work on ourselves. Yes, it needs to be in service of something. Yes, there's a world out there to be lived. But also just, how do you move through the world? Like, there's that whole idea of considering what you want people to say about you at your funeral. Quite a morbid exercise to consider, but if you could write a speech from a loved one about you, what would you want them to say? And a lot of people's are similar, right? Like, I want to have been seen as this type of person or that type of person, and you've just got to consider, how do you become more of that? Because that's who you want to be. So what small intentional steps do you need to take? What tiny steps do you need to take to start making your way towards that person? And I personally don't ever want to stop learning because it excites the shit out of me. Yeah. So I'd never built a van before. Sure, I was an electrician, but I never built a van. I learned. I watched YouTube videos, and a lot of mistakes. Because it interested me. It was like, cool, let's do it. Let's go for it. And did all of the self-development work that I've done so far help me at that time? Yes, it allowed me to slow down. It allowed me to deal with the hopelessness that I felt when I felt like I was making no progress whatsoever. Because we don't operate in isolation. Like, we're not just this one. We interact with everything around us, people, things, places. How do you like right now in Bosnia, new culture, how I would show up here if I hadn't done the work would be very different to how I show up now. That's unmistakable. It's unquestionable. Because like you said, it does. I actually think what you said makes a lot of sense. The idea that it just speeds up. It's a catalyst of. And I think that is also, for someone like yourself who's a phenomenal coach, you get to be the catalyst for someone else as well. Because you get to sit there and help them. So there's kind of the idea that we can be our own catalysts and develop, or we can reach out to mentors, coaches, go on programs that can also help become catalysts of our own change, our own growth, to use a bit of a just leveling up, right? Like that kind of idea of like leveling up.
Yeah, why not though?
Yeah.
That's where I get the optimization or the anti-optimization trend at the moment. I totally get it, and I've never really been a full optimizer anyway, Stuart.
No.
Like, so it doesn't really scream at me. I've given things a go. Like, I've done the ice baths. I do meditate. I do journal, but I wouldn't call myself. I've got a really old Garmin like on my wrist. I don't have an Oura ring. I don't have a Whoop band. I'm not, but I also at the same time, right? Like all of these things come back to the a little bit of judgment, I think. Like I not saying this is how it is for everybody, but there's
Mhm.
definitely some uncomfortable. Hold on a minute, get my teeth in. Uncomfortable feeling that people feel when they do see people over optimizing, let's just say, or just use the word optimizing because
Mhm.
it may make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. The fact that they have no idea how they sleep, they've got no idea what their heart rate is. They know that actually they do get a little bit stressed if the traffic is busy on a Monday morning and they've left 5 minutes later than they probably should. That would make somebody uncomfortable knowing that Stuart knows that he's slept 8 hours perfectly last night and his heart rate's at 55 and he's sat in the car going, oh yeah, Monday morning again, rather than for fuck's sakes, right? That would just make somebody uncomfortable. But it's also okay if you're not that asked about that too. But quite rightly, like you, that's where it always goes back to for me. It's not about, picking on my stubbornness and picking on my compassionate side. It's just about, am I learning? Have I learned something that's made me like go, wow, today? That's cool. And that could be about World War II. That could be about building a van. It could be about editing a football manager YouTube video that obviously I don't know if you've seen, I'm doing like a fun channel, YouTube channel at the moment to just let some of my creative side out. Or it could be, you know what, fuck it. Next year is the year I'm going to run 100K and that's going to be the limit. But you can choose what those things are. And I think that's the biggest lesson or the biggest skill that I think people miss in life is that there's so much choice that people let go and they just kind of like end up on that meandering river that just goes left, right, center and they're in no control of it. But sometimes got to remind people that at any point, it's not about improving you, it's just about making choices that make you content and keep you going. We're going to loop back to my point about being on that flat line, choosing what keeps you on that flat line. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like you said, there's always a judgment piece involved, and I think we're humans, so we judge. We can't help do that. We can't help but compare ourselves. Like that happens, and the thing I always come back to, and something that always helps me, be where your feet are. Where am I? I'm right here. So the people over there doing that, and the people don't matter. Be where my feet are, and is it working for me? So like, I don't track my sleep. I've got an iPhone 8. Like, I don't have a smartwatch. I don't have any. That's my choice. That's what I do. Like, I'm cool with that. And like you said, fine. No shade. You do you. And I think there's kind of. There's also an aspect of, can we give ourselves the permission to be okay with that? Like, can you give it. I used to track my sleep, and it stopped serving me. So I don't. And that's not because what I do is right or what I do is wrong or good or bad. It's because that's my life and I live my life. And other people can, and this is one of my most strongly held beliefs about coaching. I am not the expert.
Yeah.
I'm not. The person I'm coaching is. I don't live their life. I don't have their experience. I don't have their feelings. I don't have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning with the kids because I don't have kids. But that's how I can coach someone who does. Because I don't pretend to have the answers, because I don't. I don't have the answers for my own life, no matter anyone else's. Like, so it's. I just facilitate. That's who I am.
I love
So
that, man.
when someone comes to me and says, should I track my sleep? I don't know, should you? Like, well, I don't know the answer to that. You do. And we can come to an informed decision. What is it that makes you want to track your sleep? Well, this, and this. Okay, so what are the pros of doing that? This, and this. What are the cons, maybe? Oh, this, and this. What are the limitations of this approach? Oh, well, actually, maybe it could tell me that I'm well slept, but I feel like shit. Okay, cool, let's flag that. Oh, after this discussion, what decision feels right for you right now? I'm going to track my sleep. How long are you going to track it for? What date are you hoping to collect? What are you hoping to find out by the end? There's just questions. I can't answer those because I'm not that person. But that's why coaching's a catalyst, because you can offer a perspective that I couldn't offer myself, because I can't see it. Because we're human and we've got biases and blind spots, and we can't know it all, and we're not supposed to. So it's just kind of, I don't have the answers for anyone else.
Yeah.
Like, you've got the answers there. I'll try my absolute best to help you find them, and I'll present ideas, perspectives, mainly evidence supported where I can, maybe anecdotal to some degree. I think story does have power, undeniably. I think there's a lot of things that we don't have research for, but I'll tell you when that's the case. I'll try and state when it's my opinion. I'll try and own my own biases. I get coaching to try and help own my own blind spots. I'm always very aware that I don't ever want to come across as like some kind of guru, because I'm not. Like, I've lived my life. I've read some books. I've listened to some podcasts. I've tried to explore this work with as much humility and as possible. I get it wrong a lot of the time, because that's just being human. But it's how do you show up after that?
For sure. Mate, I love this. This could go on forever, I think. But I am going to bring things to a close by asking you the final 100% question today. It may be the same answer as 2 years ago. And if it is, it's just a reminder for everybody else. But it may be a totally new one. What is the greatest bit of advice Stuart Graham has ever been given?
I can't remember what I said last time. Oh, I think I mentioned Jeb and his stop looking for other people for advice. That is still pretty. If I didn't say that, I'm going to say that now, and just I asked for 3 pieces of advice on my podcast, and he replied, "Stop asking other people for advice," and I thought that was great. Like, stop looking to other people for wisdom. I thought that was great, but I don't think anyone's naturally give me it directly. It's something that I saw someone saying online, and it's effectively something that we talked about on this podcast. And there's a whole world out there. Go and live it. It's why I travel. It's why I'm in a van. It's why, and this is maybe it's less what someone's given me and maybe more my thoughts and other people to ponder on. There is nothing that gives you more perspective than seeing other people's lives, experiencing other people's cultures, having an understanding of the lives that they live and go through. And this afternoon we're going to the Sarajevo Museum of War Crimes Against Humanity. It's going to be one of the most depressing places, but it also gives you a perspective you'll never get any other way. I've been to Auschwitz, I've been to the War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City. Expose yourself to new perspectives. Go out there and see the world. Ask questions, be curious. I'm sure someone will have said all of that to me at some point, because at the end of the day, none of those are unique ideas, so they're not uniquely mine. What is uniquely mine? Probably not much, because I'm just a blend of every other source, but that's the answer. Go out there and live in the world. Be in the world. See it. In your own unique way. It can be in the UK. It can be in a coffee shop in your local town. Sit in that coffee shop and see something that you've never seen before. Notice a detail that you've never noticed. What colour's the wall? What colour's the wallpaper? Is the same person in there that you see every time that you go in there? What's their life story? There's a world out there. Go and live in it.
Love that, my dude. Stuart, where can people come and find out more about you if they feel the desire to do so after this amazing podcast episode?
Stu.graham.s25. That's my Instagram. That is where most stuff goes down these days. And then obviously anything else links from there. I haven't done an episode of the podcast in a very long time, but that does exist with 270 episodes. So feel free to go and check them out. The Seeking Insights podcast. And yeah, that's about it really. It's been a bloody pleasure, sir. I've spoke a lot, I realise, but just the pure excitement of getting to talk about ideas and this whole thing we call self-development life. I've missed speaking on podcasts, so it was an absolute honour to be here and be on yours.
It's definitely the right time to get you back, sir, and some definite new insights from you to share with the listeners. And listeners, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please go over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and either click that subscribe or follow button. It goes a long, long way to helping the show. And also, if you can see the 5-star review button, whack that one too, because that is very much appreciated. And YouTube, hi YouTube, like, subscribe below. Again, helps the algorithm, does me and Stuart a massive favour, and we will see you, or I will see you, for an episode every Friday. Take care.